The barn was gone by sunrise. What remained was a skeleton of black beams and twisted iron, smoke curling like ghosts into the pale sky. Clara Ellsworth stood barefoot in the mud, her dress torn at the hem, her hands streaked with ash. They had pulled her husband from the fire hours before. Pulled was too kind a word. His body had been dragged from the collapsing beams, charred and broken. She had screamed until her throat was raw, until her voice splintered into nothing. Now she stood silent. The world itself seemed mute. No birds, no wind, only the creak of timber still smoldering. Her eyes burned from smoke and grief, yet she would not weep. Tears felt too small for what had been taken. The preacher hovered nearby, hat pressed to his chest, words failing him. Neighbors whispered, their faces hidden behind hands. Some said the fire was an accident. Others spoke softer, muttering the truth no one wished to say aloud. The barn had been lit by a rustler's hand. Clara heard them. She heard every word, but the whispers could not wound her more than the emptiness already had. She lifted her gaze to the horizon, to the wide prairie where the sun bled into gold. Somewhere out there rode the man who had stolen her life. She would know his name soon enough. The town buried her husband at dusk. The grave was shallow, the earth hard with frost. She stood alone as they lowered him down, the preacher's voice carried off by the wind. Clara clutched her shawl, staring at the mound of dirt as though sheer will could bring him back, but nothing stirred. The grave swallowed all. That night she lay in the empty bed, the house creaking like it carried grief in its bones. She closed her eyes, but the fire replayed again and again. The barn collapsing, her husband's voice shouting her name, the smell of hair and flesh burning. She woke screaming, clutching the sheets, throat raw. Silence followed, heavier than before. By morning, the town had moved on. The saloon doors swung, boots stomped, cattle lowered in the fields. Men spoke of markets, women of Sunday gatherings. Only Clara carried the fire still, burning inside her chest. She walked to the barn ruins, bare feet crunching on blackened straw. The ground reeked of smoke. She knelt in the ashes, her fingers sifting through rubble, as if somewhere beneath she might find something of him that remained. A boot buckle. It's a scrap of cloth, anything the fire had not claimed. Instead, her hand closed around a bullet casing. Brass scorched, unmistakable. Her breath caught. This had not been an accident. She rose to her feet, fist clenched tight around the casing. The wind swept across the plains, cold against her damp cheeks. She whispered his name into the emptiness. Not her husband's, but the man she would hunt. Somewhere the rustler rode free, laughing. But she would not forget. She would not forgive. Days blurred into nights. Clara moved through them like a shadow, her body still, her mind consumed by fire. The townsfolk watched with wary eyes. They muttered that grief had hollowed her out, that madness followed close. She ignored them. Her world had narrowed to a single ember, glowing, waiting to burn. On the fifth night, a storm rolled over the prairie. Thunder shook the windows, rain beat against the roof. Clara lit a single lamp, sitting by the table where her husband once carved their initials. She pressed the bullet casing to the wood, tracing the grooves with her fingertip. Her jaw set. She swore then. Swore aloud, her voice steady even as the storm rattled the walls. I will see him dead. The lamp flickered, shadows leaping across the room. She clutched the casing to her chest, her eyes fixed on the darkness outside. In the morning, she saddled her husband's horse. The leather creaked beneath her weight, the animal restless beneath her hands. She rode into town, mud splashing up her skirts, her hair whipped loose by the wind. Men looked up from their work as she passed. Some tipped their hats, some frowned, but none dared speak. They saw the fire in her eyes, and they knew. At the sheriff's office, she dismounted. The door creaked as she pushed inside. The air smelled of tobacco and damp paper. The sheriff sat behind his desk, boots propped up, hat pulled low. He looked up slow, his face weathered by years of dust and gun smoke. Clara dropped the casing onto his desk. It rolled once, then stilled. His eyes narrowed. Where'd you find it? In the ashes, she whispered. The sheriff leaned back, scratching his jaw. Could be anyone's, could be old. Her voice sharpened. It isn't. Silence stretched. He studied her, then sighed. Word is Amos Pike's been seen near the river. Rustler, drunk with a mean streak. He's lit barns before. Clara's stomach twisted. The name seared itself into her chest. Amos Pike. the man who had set her world alight. The sheriff exhaled, tired. "Leave it be. Justice'll find him in time." Her hands shook, but her voice stayed steady. "No, justice already failed." She turned and walked out before he could answer. Outside, the sun burned hot, the sky wide and merciless. Clara mounted her horse, her fingers tight on the reins. She whispered the name again, Amos Pike, and felt the fire flare inside her. From that moment on, grief was no longer her burden. Vengeance was. The wind howled across the prairie as she rode back home, carrying ash into the sky, scattering it across fields that would never again feel whole. She did not look back at the ruins. She carried them within her, and somewhere Amos Pike rode free, not knowing that the widow in black had sworn to carry him into his grave. The prairie stretched wide beneath the burning sun. Heat shimmered on the horizon, waves rolling across the dry grass. A lone rider cut through it all, his horse lathered, his laughter sharp against the silence. Amos Pike carried no fear. He carried only the weight of stolen cattle and the memory of flames he left behind. The herd moved slowly ahead of him, 20 heads branded with marks that were not his. Each animal bawled, stumbling in the dust. He whipped them forward, spurs digging, his grin wide. Behind him, the smoke of the burned barn still haunted the sky, faint but lingering, a scar on the world. He did not care. Amos was a man raised in shadow, son of a drunk who swung fists quicker than words. He had grown to know only two things: take what you want and strike before struck. By 12, he was stealing horses. By 15, he had shot his first man. The years blurred into whiskey and gunpowder, each day bleeding into the next. But the fire, that had been different. He could still hear the crack of timber, the scream of animals trapped inside, the widow's voice tearing through the smoke. It echoed in him, not with guilt, but with delight. The sound of something breaking. As the sun dipped low, Amos camped near the river. The herd bunched together, restless. He tethered his horse, built a fire, and drank deep from a bottle pulled from his saddlebag. Whiskey burned down his throat, sharp and hot, but he welcomed the sting. He leaned back on his bedroll, eyes on the fire. Sparks drifted up like lost souls. He chuckled, remembering the look on the widow's face when the barn collapsed. Wide eyes, lips trembling, body frozen in helplessness. "She'll remember me," he muttered, lifting the bottle again. And she did. Miles away, Clara Ellsworth sat at her table, tracing the bullet casing with her fingertip. His name burned in her chest, echoing in her mind. Amos Pike. She imagined him laughing even now, whiskey in hand, boasting of what he'd done. Her fists clenched, her grief sharpened into a blade. Back at the river, Amos stirred as the wind shifted. Coyotes yipped in the distance, their cries rising and falling like laughter. He spat into the dirt, muttering, "Better company than most." The firelight flickered across his face, deepening the scars that cut across his jaw. His eyes gleamed like a man who had stared at death and found it wanting. He thought of the townsfolk, of their weak spines and softer hearts. He thought of the sheriff, slow and weary, more likely to bury a crime than chase it. They would not stop him. No one ever had. But as he lay down, his head heavy with drink, a strange thought wormed into his mind. The widow. Her eyes in the firelight. They had seared into him, sharper than the flames. He licked his lips, smiling. Maybe he'd ride back. Maybe he'd see her again. The thought lingered as he drifted into sleep, the whiskey bottle rolling into the dirt beside him. At dawn, the sky bled red, the river mist rising. Amos saddled his horse, the herd restless, moving slow toward the canyon trails. He chewed on a strip of jerky, his jaw working steady, his mind already turning. The widow's face would not leave him. It haunted the edges of his thoughts, not with guilt, but with something darker. Curiosity, hunger. By noon, he was grinning again. "Yeah," he said aloud, his voice carrying across the plains. "I'll see her soon." He spurred his horse harder, driving the cattle onward, dust rising thick behind them. His shadow stretched long across the ground, cutting the sunlit earth in two. The townsfolk whispered of Amos Pike as though he were a storm. Mothers drew children close when his name was spoken. Men tightened their grips on rifles. Yet none dared face him. He was a shadow too wide, too cruel, but one woman had sworn she would. Far across the plains, Clara stitched her husband's torn coat by lamplight. Each pass of the needle was a vow. Each knot tied was a promise. She whispered his name with every stitch. Amos Pike. The rustler rode free, but his freedom was not endless. A shadow stretched after him. Not the sheriff, not the law, but a widow with fire in her heart. And though Amos laughed beneath the burning sun, somewhere deep inside, a chill stirred. He would never name it fear. But it was there, coiled like a snake, waiting. The wind carried it across the prairie. A whisper lost in the grass. The widow was coming. The saloon was never quiet, not even on Sunday nights when the church bell had just stopped ringing. Laughter rolled out through the swinging doors, tangled with the smell of whiskey, tobacco, and stale sweat. The piano stumbled through a tune no one cared to name. Cards slapped wood. Coins clinked. But beneath the noise ran something sharper. Whispers, the kind that slid through smoke like knives. Clara Ellsworth heard them before she even stepped through the door. She had come for flour, not drink, but the store had closed early. The saloon kept barrels in back, and hunger was crueler than shame. She walked past the doors with her shawl pulled tight, hoping no one would notice. They noticed, that's her, the widow from the barn fire. She's been seen with a look in her eyes. Dangerous. The words stung, but she kept walking. Her boots struck the boardwalk firm, steady, though her heart pounded against her ribs. The town had turned colder since her vow at the sheriff's desk. Every step she took was weighed down by stares, by judgment. Inside, Amos Pike's name rode on every tongue. The rustler had been spotted near the river again. Cattle missing. A ranch hand beaten bloody. Men leaned close, muttering about hunting parties, about gathering rifles. But their words were smoke only. No one moved. "She'll bring him here," one man whispered loud enough for her to hear. "He'll come sniffing after her like a wolf." Another spat into the sawdust. "Best she leaves before he does." Clara quickened her pace. She wanted to shut her ears, to let the noise slide off, but each word cut deeper. They blamed her, not him. Her presence, her grief, her very breath was a curse in their eyes. And then, as she passed the swinging doors, silence fell. The piano stopped mid-note. The laughter stilled. She had not meant to draw their eyes, but every head turned. She froze. At the far table, cards in hand, sat Silas Harlan. A gambler, drifter, man of shadows. His coat was dusty, his eyes cold as steel. But when he looked up, his gaze lingered too long. The room shifted with that glance. Whispers hissed like snakes. "See how he looks at her? She'll fall next, same as her husband. Mark my words, it'll end in blood." Clara's face burned. She wanted to flee, but her feet betrayed her, carrying her inside. The air thickened, smoke heavy in her throat. She crossed to the back where the barkeep waited, flour sack already measured. She paid in silence, her hands trembling as she lifted it to her hip. Still, the eyes followed. Still, the whispers spread. Silas rose. His chair scraped against the wood, loud in the hush. He tucked his cards into his vest, his gaze never leaving hers. For a moment, Clara felt the floor tilt beneath her. Something in his stare was too sharp, too knowing. He tipped his hat, slow, deliberate. The whispers flared hotter. Clara turned, forcing her boots forward, refusing to run. She pushed through the doors, the night air hitting her face like a slap. Behind her, the noise swelled again, laughter louder, crueler. She walked fast down the street, the flour sack heavy, her breath ragged. Shame burned her throat, but beneath it flickered something else. Anger. She had not asked for Silas's gaze. She had not asked for the whispers, the stares, the venom. Yet they poured it on her all the same, as though her grief were sin, as though her husband's death were her fault. She stopped beneath the lamplight, clutching the sack to her chest. The wind tugged at her shawl. Tears burned, but she would not let them fall. Behind her, the saloon doors creaked. Boots struck the boardwalk. She turned. Silas stood there, hat low, cigarette glowing faint in the dark. He did not speak at first, only watched her, his face unreadable. Finally, his voice came low, steady. "They'll never stop talking." Her throat tightened. "Then they'll choke on it." For the first time, his lips curved, not a smile, but something close. Approval, maybe, or understanding. But before another word could pass, the church bell rang once, sharp against the night. A warning, not a call. Clara's breath caught. Everyone in town knew the bell rang only for one thing: danger on the horizon. The saloon emptied fast. Men poured into the street, rifles lifted, voices sharp with fear. The sheriff appeared, his badge glinting, shouting over the crowd. "Rustlers by the river. Herd's been taken." The name spread like wildfire, carried on every tongue. Amos Pike. Clara's chest clenched. Her hands shook against the sack. Around her, men loaded guns, faces pale. Yet none looked ready to ride. None except Silas. He dropped his cigarette into the dirt, grinding it under his boot. His eyes met hers once more. "He's coming," Silas said. Clara's heart pounded. She wanted to deny it, to claim he was wrong. But she knew. The whispers had been right all along. Amos would come for her, like a wolf circling the lamb. And when he did, no one in town would stand in his way. The night air smelled of hay, sweat, and rain-soaked earth. Clouds drifted across the moon, shadows shifting like restless ghosts. Clara Ellsworth stirred in her bed, heart quickening before she even knew why. A sound had woken her, the creak of a stable door. She sat upright, listening. The house was silent, but outside, there it was again. Hinges groaning low. The horses snorted, hooves scraping the packed dirt floor. Her body went cold. She reached for the pistol on her nightstand, her husband's old Colt. It felt heavy, too heavy in her trembling hands. She rose, shawl wrapped tight, bare feet silent on the wooden floor. Another sound. Boots, slow, careful, moving in the barn. Clara pressed her back against the doorframe, breath shallow. Fear clawed at her chest, but anger burned hotter. She would not cower. Not tonight. She lit a lantern, shielding the flame with her palm. Its glow painted her face gold, her eyes sharp despite the tremor in her hands. She stepped into the night. The barn loomed before her, black against the sky. The door hung half open, swaying in the wind. Shadows shifted inside. Clara tightened her grip on the pistol. Each step through the damp grass felt louder than thunder. The lantern swung in her hand, its flame flickering. She pushed the door wider. The horses stirred, eyes rolling white, nostrils flaring. The smell of gunpowder hung faint in the air, sharp, unmistakable. "Who's there?" she whispered. A figure moved in the shadows. Boots crunched straw. A hat brim caught the lantern's glow. Her breath caught Amos Pike. The rustler stood among the stalls, his hand stroking the flank of her husband's horse, as though it were his own. His eyes glinted, cruel and amused. "Evenin', widow," he drawled. "Mighty fine animals you got left." Her pistol jerked upward. "Get out," he chuckled low, stepping closer. The horses shifted nervously around him. Now. That's no way to greet a man, especially not one who's taken such a shine to you." Her stomach twisted. "You lit the fire. You killed him." His grin widened, showing yellow teeth. "And I'd do it again. He stood in my way. You could be different." The words slithered over her like snakes. She fought the urge to gag. Her finger pressed harder on the trigger, but her hand shook. Amos tilted his head, studying her. "Ain't nobody else here. Just you and me. Town won't lift a finger to save you. You know that." Her pulse thundered. She wanted to shoot, to end it now, but her body betrayed her. Her grief, her rage, her fear tangled into paralysis. Then another sound. Boots on gravel outside. Slow. Certain. Amos stiffened, hand dropping toward his holster. Clara's lantern light swung across the door. A tall figure stepped in. Silas Harlan. The gambler filled the doorway, revolver already drawn. His face was shadowed, but his voice cut sharp through the dark. "Step away from her, Pike." The horses reared, hooves striking wood. Amos's smile faltered, but only for a heartbeat. He straightened, his own gun half raised. Well, he sneered. "The card is sharp. Come to play hero, though you only played games with drunks and dice." Silas's eyes never wavered. "You've taken enough. Tonight it ends." Clara's chest tightened. The barn felt too small, too full of smoke and heat, though no fire burned. The three of them stood locked, the silence stretched taut as a noose. Amos spat into the straw. "You really think she's worth dying for?" Silas's jaw clenched. His revolver stayed steady. "I already decided she is." Clara's throat burned. Her hand shook around the Colt. She wanted to scream at them both, to beg for the madness to stop, but no sound came. The wind moaned through the rafters. The lantern flickered. Then Amos moved, fast. His pistol rose, steel glinting in the flame. The horses screamed, hooves thrashing. Clara gasped, raising her Colt with both hands. Silas fired, the blast deafening in the small space. Amos dove aside, the bullet tearing splinters from the wall. Chaos exploded. Clara stumbled back, lantern swinging wild, flame nearly spilling. Silas fired again, the crack sharp, smoke choking the air. Amos's laugh rang harsh, echoing above the gunfire. Clara squeezed the trigger. The Colt bucked, recoiled, jolting her arm. The shot went wide, shattering a feed bucket. The horses reared higher, eyes rolling white, screams filling the barn. Amos lunged forward, his hand brushing her wrist, twisting. She cried out, the pistol clattering to the straw. His breath was hot against her face, his eyes wild. "You ain't got the stomach," he hissed. Then Silas was there. He slammed into Amos, the two men crashing against a stall door. Wood splintered, horses bolted. The lantern toppled, flame licking the straw. Fire again. Clara's scream tore through the night. She snatched the lantern, smothering the flame with her shawl, coughing against the smoke. The memory of the last fire seared her, every nerve screaming. She beat the ember until it died, her lungs heaving. Behind her, fists struck flesh. Boots scraped. Silas and Amos grappled, each blow heavy, savage. Guns lay forgotten in the straw. Clara spun, chest heaving, eyes wild. She reached for the Colt, fingers closing around the grip. Her hands trembled as she lifted it, aiming at the tangle of men. Amos had Silas by the throat, pressing him against the wall. His grin shone cruelly in the lantern light. "Say goodbye, gambler." Clara's finger trembled on the trigger. Her vision blurred with tears, her heart pounding like war drums. She whispered her husband's name and pulled the trigger. The gunshot split the barn wide open. Smoke filled the air, acrid and choking. Clara's ears rang, her body shaking as though lightning had struck her bones. Amos Pike staggered back, his hand clutching his shoulder where blood poured hot through his shirt. His grin twisted, not with pain but with something worse. Hunger, madness. Silas dropped to his knees, gasping for air, his throat raw where Amos's grip had nearly crushed the life from him. He scrambled for his revolver, but Amos kicked it aside, steel clattering across the floor. Clara held her husband's Colt in both hands, arms trembling, eyes wide. The pistol smoked, the scent of gunpowder thick. She could barely breathe. She had fired. She had struck, but it wasn't enough. Amos straightened, laughter bubbling through blood. "You got fire, widow, I like that." He lunged. Clara screamed, but before his hand closed around her wrist, Silas slammed into him again. They crashed into the stall, wood shattering. Horses screamed and bolted, hooves pounding against the earth as they fled into the night. The barn groaned with the violence, rafters rattling. Amos grunted as Silas's fist struck his jaw. Blood sprayed, teeth flashing. Yet still he laughed, even as his back hit the wall. "You can't stop me," he spat. Silas's voice was ragged, low. "Watch me." They grappled, sweat and blood mixing in the straw. Clara clutched the Colt, her finger brushing the trigger, but fear locked her joints. If she missed, if she struck Silas instead, her chest heaved. Her eyes blurred with tears. She dropped the gun. "Clara!" Silas barked, his voice raw, desperate, but her knees buckled. She sank into the straw, hands clutching her shawl, sobs choking her throat. She wanted the fire gone, the blood gone, all of it erased. Yet it burned hotter, closer, consuming her. Amos shoved Silas back, his grin savage. He seized Clara's chin, forcing her face up. His breath stank of whiskey and iron. "You'll remember me," he hissed. Long after he's gone, Clara's heart thundered. Her lips parted, trembling. She whispered one word. Not his name, but her husband's. Silas roared, tackling him from behind. The three of them crashed to the ground, tangled in hay and smoke. And then it happened. In the chaos, in the struggle, Amos pressed his bloodied mouth against Clara's. A kiss. Brutal, mocking, meant to brand her forever. Her scream tore the night. She shoved him back, gagging, her body shaking with horror. Silas's fury exploded. His fist struck again and again, knuckles splitting. Blood sprayed the walls, the floor, the straw. Amos laughed through it, choking, spitting red, until finally Silas seized his revolver. He pressed the barrel to Amos's chest. His hand shook. His breath came ragged. "Do it," Amos rasped, blood bubbling on his lips. "Make her yours." The words cut deeper than any blade. Silas froze. He saw Clara's wide eyes, her trembling hands, her shawl stained with blood and ash. If he pulled the trigger, the town would say she belonged to him. That her curse had spread to another man. Clara met his gaze. Her lips trembled. "Please," she whispered. But Silas couldn't move. His past chained him. Every ghost he carried screamed in his ears. So Clara did what he couldn't. Her hand closed over his. Together their fingers squeezed the trigger. The gun roared. Amos's body jerked. Blood poured from his chest, soaking the straw. His grin faltered at last, his eyes wide, shocked. He gasped once, twice, then slumped heavy into the dirt. Silence. Only the horses far off, their cries fading into the night. Clara's chest heaved. Her lips still burned with the vile kiss, her heart heavy with the shot she had fired. She pressed a hand to her mouth, choking back sobs. Silas dropped the gun, his body shaking. He looked at her, eyes haunted. It's done, but it wasn't, not for her. Not for him. The barn stank of blood and smoke, of sin and sorrow. The weight of what they had done pressed down like a storm, refusing to break. Clara turned away, tears streaking her cheeks. Nothing will ever be done. Silas wanted to reach for her, to hold her, but his hands were stained too red. He stayed where he was, staring at the corpse cooling in the straw. The night air swept through the broken door, carrying the scent of rain and ash. Clara shivered. Her lips trembled, and yet against her will her body leaned toward him. For a heartbeat their faces were close, too close. Silas froze. His breath caught. Then, without meaning, his lips brushed hers. It was not violent. Not cruel. Soft, fleeting, tender. A kiss not of triumph, but of ruin. Clara pulled away, tears burning her eyes. "We can't," Silas nodded, his throat raw. "I know. But the truth was carved in both their chests now. A kiss bound by blood. A love that could never live." The barn fell into silence. The rustler lay dead. The widow wept. The gambler carried the weight of her grief as though it were his own. And outside, the prairie wind rose, scattering ashes across the night sky. Dawn bled slow over the horizon, the sky pale gold and gray. Smoke curled from the barn's broken roof, drifting into the morning air like ghosts too restless to stay buried. The world was quiet except for the crackle of dying embers and the caw of distant crows. Clara Ellsworth stood in the yard, her shawl wrapped tight, her eyes hollow. Blood stained the hem of her dress, a dark reminder of the night behind her. She had not slept, could not. Each time she closed her eyes, she felt the rustler's kiss, tasted the iron and whiskey, heard the guns roar as Amos Pike fell into the straw. Silas Harlan leaned against the hitching post, hat low, eyes shadowed. He had not spoken much since the shot. His revolver still smelled of smoke, though it hung heavy in its holster. He looked like a man who had killed before, but this time something had broken deeper. The town woke slow, lanterns flickering out, boots striking boardwalks. Word spread faster than fire. Amos Pike was dead, shot in the widow's barn. Some said Clara pulled the trigger. Others swore the gambler had. None knew the truth and none cared. Gossip was truer than fact in a place like this. By mid-morning, neighbors gathered outside her gate whispering, "She's cursed. First her husband, now Pike. Mark my words, she'll drag him down too." Clara heard them. Each word sank like stone, but she kept her chin high. She had faced fire. She had faced death. She would face this too. Silas shifted beside her, his jaw tight. He wanted to silence them, to raise his voice, to strike. But he didn't. He knew the town. Words only fed their hunger. The only thing left was silence. The sheriff arrived by noon. His horse kicked dust as he reined in. His face was grave, his badge dull in the sun. He studied the two of them, his gaze sharp, tired. "Pike was wanted," he said. "Dead or alive. The law won't come for you." Clara exhaled slow, but the relief was thin. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "The people, though, that's different. They'll talk. They'll tear you apart with it." He turned to Silas. "And you? A gambler, a drifter, now tangled in this mess. If you stay, it'll only fester." Silas said nothing. His silence was its own vow. The sheriff sighed, tugging at his reins. Bury him outside the fence. No prayers, no hymns. He earned that much, and no more. By dusk, Amos Pike was in the ground. The grave was shallow, dirt piled quick, no marker but a crooked post. The wind moaned across the prairie, scattering dust over his resting place. No one mourned. No one sang. Clara stood apart, her shawl clutched tight, her breath trembling. She thought of her husband's grave, of the hymns sung soft, of hands that had once held hers. Now there was nothing but silence. Silas joined her at the ridge, his boots crunching slow. For a while they did not speak. The sun bled red into the horizon, the sky like a wound stretched wide. Finally, Clara whispered, "It should feel like justice." Silas's voice was rough, low. "Justice don't feel like anything. Just leaves you empty." Her eyes stung. She turned away, tears slipping free. "I don't know how to live after this." He wanted to reach for her, to hold her until the tremor eased. But he didn't. His hands were stained, his soul heavier than his gun. He stayed still, his voice quiet, one step at a time. That night the town shunned them both. Doors closed, shutters drawn. No lamps lit the street as Clara walked home. Silas followed at a distance, a shadow bound to her by blood and silence. Inside, the house creaked. The table still bore her husband's carved initials. She touched them with shaking fingers, whispering his name into the quiet. Behind her, Silas lingered at the threshold. "If you want me gone," he said, "say it." She turned, eyes glistening. Her voice cracked. "I don't want you gone. I just don't know what I want." Their gazes held. Something fragile stirred between them, sharp as grief, tender as longing. Forbidden yet alive, he stepped closer. She did not move, the distance closed. Their breath mingled. For a heartbeat, the world held still. Then Clara shook her head, whispering, "We can't." Silas nodded, his voice breaking. "I know," but neither stepped back. The silence stretched, thick with all they would not say. At dawn, Clara saddled her horse. Her decision was carved into her face. She could not stay. The whispers would kill her faster than any rustler's gun. Silas stood at the gate, hat in hand. His voice came rough. "Let me ride with you. Please pass the ridge." She nodded, tears burning her eyes. They rode together through the prairie grass, the sun rising gold over the fields. The air smelled of sage, of dust, of endings. At the ridge, Clara stopped. She turned to him, her face pale in the light. Their eyes met, holding all the words unspoken. Love, regret, goodbye. Her lips trembled. "Thank you." His throat tightened. He tipped his hat, his voice low. "One more bullet, Clara. If the world comes for you again, I'll spend it." She swallowed, unable to answer. Her heart ached, torn between staying, leaving, and the ghosts that bound her to both. At last she turned her horse, riding into the horizon. Dust rose behind her, her figure shrinking into the endless sky. Silas sat still, watching, his chest heavy. He felt the last piece of himself crumble into ash. The prairie wind carried her shawl's final flutter, scattering it like smoke across the dawn. And in that silence, he made his vow. He would wait, with gun, with heart, with the last fragment of hope still burning in him, always for her.